All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people just like you and just like me. So yesterday, the news broke that Steve Perry is thinking about or has discussed the possibility of doing a residency either in New York or Las Vegas. Steve, I would highly recommend that you don't consider New York City. All right, that place is locked down tighter than a drum, and so many different restrictions on movement. And you're going to have QR codes. I think 5-year-olds in New York are going to have a QR code in order to go out to dinner with their family. Just absolutely insane, mind-boggling tyranny. Not sure if Steve Perry knows all of this stuff or pays attention to it. The idea of Steve Perry touring, if you go back and watch the very first VH1 documentary after the band broke up, and Steve Perry talks about, touring. He's thought about touring. He would really like to tour. Steve Perry has not toured since the days of For the Love of Strange Medicine. He has not toured. He has done a couple of surprise appearances with the Eels. And he mentions in this article that he may just show up somewhere, much like he did with the Eels, do a couple of Christmas songs. So I guess if you're out and about and you're thinking about going to a show where they might be doing some Christmas music, you never know. Steve Perry might show up. Now, how high is this possibility? Well, the couple of songs thing, I think, is totally legitimate. The, entire show, A Night with Steve Perry, hard to think that might actually happen. It just, so far, based on the evidence that we've seen, and this is spanning now 20 years of Perry telling us that he's thinking about going on tour. I mean, it's a long time to think about it, Steve. And for some of the fans who are a little less patient, like yours truly, it's like the boy who cries wolf. After a while, you're like, okay, Steve, I know you're thinking about touring. The other point of note here, or important point, is that when Journey starts to ramp up their operations, I've noticed that Steve Perry comes out of the woodwork a little bit. He's not in the news every day, but he'll throw something out there for people to chew on a little bit. And then he goes away, and then Journey does something, and then he comes out again. And that's been a pattern, if you look back at least the last 3 or 4 years, where Journey does something, then Steve Perry does something. Perry did something much bigger a few years ago when he released an entire album's worth of new material, which was actually quite surprising. I was beginning to give up on it. He says he's got a whole bunch of other songs that have been written, and he's still working on them. Again, my question would be, Steve, when, brother, when? He mentions that he's going to be 74 years old. And yeah, 74. And he mentions, Uncle Steve is not a spring chicken anymore. All of this kind of plays into this sort of stringing everybody along, say, hey, I'd really like to be out there on tour. And you give people some hope, I guess. And you sort of whet the appetite for maybe what that new material might be. He says it's not going to be like the music on Traces. I think Steve Perry knows instinctively that maybe the fans want something a little more up-tempo, a little bit more upbeat, generally speaking, for more of the album. Of course, there's nobody that would turn down a Steve Perry ballad per se, but if people were a little mixed on Traces, as time has gone on, I've tended to like it more, just because it's, number one, it's new music from Perry. There are a lot of great melodies on this record. And yes, he had some great co-writing partners, including John Five and Randy Goodrum. So this was, you know, again, it was a pretty solid record. You can argue about whether Perry's voice is in a place that you enjoy. I think most of his fans have given him a pass on that, and I've noticed that over and over again. Here's another thing why Perry might be throwing the possibility of Las Vegas out there. He might be seeing David Lee Roth, and he realizes that, hey, if I'm worried about my voice, right? I'm Steve Perry and I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't do this. Then you go and you look at Roth and see what he does when he goes out there. And Perry's probably thinking, I can do that. I can do way better than that. And I think that's probably where he's coming from if he's actually considering going to Vegas. People would love to see Steve Perry, probably a lot more so than David Lee Roth. And Roth just added 4 more shows. Now he was quitting, and now he's saying he might not be quitting. That's Roth. So he's kind of, again, stringing along people into his high-priced volume ticket sales for 4 more shows, and he'll probably sell them out. People are definitely up for some nostalgia, even if it's poorly executed. But when it comes to Steve Perry, you know, it seems just when you think he's out, he pulls himself back in. So Journey ramping up their operations, they're out on the road. Journey obviously in Vegas as well. So again, a little shot across the bow. Hey, if you guys can do this, certainly I can do it as well. Do I know anything for certain on this? No. With Steve Perry, the highest percentage of possibility from what he talked about is this random, I'm going to show up and surprise some band that I like and get out there and sing a couple of songs and tune everything down a lot, much like they did with the Eels. And who wouldn't want to have Steve Perry in as a guest for a couple of tracks, and then Steve can wave and say goodbye, and maybe he does it again. Maybe then that particular band has a run on tickets because people are hoping Steve will show up again and do another one of these surprise appearances. I wouldn't hold your breath on any of it, but it's good to speculate. That's what we do here on this channel from time to time. And with Steve Perry, you have to do speculation, because unless you know the guy personally, and you're calling him up every other day to find out where his head is at, you're not going to know diddly squat, because Steve Perry pretty much operates under the radar, and he's very reclusive. This whole social distancing thing was perfect for Steve Perry because he was doing this, 30 years ago. So there you have it. That's my perspective. Will Steve Perry go out on the road? My guess, if he does, he would be far more comfortable with that one-off appearance where he shows up for a couple of songs. The Vegas thing, I'm thinking, again, it's a possibility, and maybe he's just looking at Journey being there and David Lee Roth being there and just saying, well, I could do this. I could do it. I mean, how bad could I be, right? But yeah, people, I think, would be much more inclined to see Steve Perry in Vegas than some of these other people that keep showing up there. But in any event, we shall see. I'm sure we'll have a bit of a wait to find out what Perry is going to say next. It won't be tomorrow, most likely, unless, again, he's going to surprise everybody. But my guess is you probably won't hear from Perry till after the new year. So that's it. Done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you're a patron on Patreon. For $1 a month, you can support this channel. Got a few videos over on Rumble, not a lot, but it's kind of what I'm thinking about and what I really can't say over here on this platform. Sometimes I just even upload content from other people that I feel is interesting and relevant. It might not even have anything to do with music necessarily. So just what I'm doing these days. And thanks again for supporting, and I will see you soon.